And so with the inevitable passage of time, my daily view goes from Om and the Sea Goddess to Nanny Og and Casanunda. So as promised, I have come back to your tiny little YouTube screens to tell you about the books I read in January. If you saw my inaugural To Be Read video, you will know that I planned to read 6 books throughout January, and I actually read 10. Only those 10 didn't necessarily include the 6 I set out for. They almost did though, I was quite close. I did read The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, which I did really enjoy, but I actually gave a lower star rating to this time. I think it shows how fickle my Goodread awarding of points is. It really does depend on what I just read beforehand. If that was good or bad, my next book will come off better or worse. I also finished If on a Winter's Night a Traveller. I read through it quite quickly, it was quite enjoyable. The problem is, now, only weeks after finishing it, I couldn't really say what happened at the end. Yeah, it didn't really have a huge impression on me, apart from all the titles of our previous beginnings becoming a little story in themselves. That was quite cool. I think the brilliant thing about this book is the concept of it, the story that never gets told, and how reading works. It doesn't really have a beginning to end plot, and as such, its ending wasn't that important. I then read The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, which I really got into eventually. The beginning was slow, but about 300 pages in, you do really want to find out what happens. You do care about Vin, you care about Kelsier. As good as I thought this was, though, I have just been ruined by having read the Stormlight Archive. I kept thinking as I read this book that I saw seeds of ideas which were okay, but that Brandon Sanderson really did well in his later books. I will definitely read more Mistborn. I kind of want to read everything Brandon Sanderson has written at the moment, but if I'm recommending him to anyone else, I will definitely recommend starting with Way of Kings, not The Final Empire. I then finally turned the last page on Going Bovine by Libba Bray. There's an extent to which I really don't understand how I managed to pause for so long without completing this book. It is really great. It should be up there alongside Looking for Alaska and The Fault in Our Stars on brilliant YA books that really consider the concept of mortality. But again, like Sanderson, although Libba Bray is great in this book, although she exhibits some interesting and amazing writing, I think she hones it better in her later books, in Libba Bray's case, in Beauty Queens. Going Bovine is a very different subject matter to Beauty Queens. I only really compare them because they're both so satirical. Beauty Queens, I think most people would agree, really focuses on gender. Going Bovine really focuses on life and death. I personally would love to see Libba Bray try and tackle this topic again. I think Beauty Queens was so much more poised, so much more polished. Going Bovine had some great raw emotion, but it did feel a tiny bit rough, a tiny bit messy. I would still definitely recommend this book. I don't think there are others that deal with this exact subject matter in this really brilliant way. I just think Libba Bray, having read her other stuff, she could probably do it better one day. I then finished The Declaration by Gemma Malley, and this, unfortunately, I can understand why I gave up on the first time. I'm not sure I should have gone back to it and finished it. Yeah, I've rated this quite low. I was hoping that I'd just grown bored of dystopia, that a break from it might reconcile me to it, but I found loads of problems with this. I really liked the initial concept, that they had discovered a cure to dying and aging, thus no more children were allowed to be born. But beyond that, I just don't think Gemma Malley did it very well. The whole way through, I kept thinking, if I was writing this story, I would have done this differently, and I wouldn't have done that, and I would have done this so much better. I really hate the insta-love between the two main characters, the fact that they are the only two main characters of the right age, so that's definitely gonna happen. The fact that the fairy tale loving parents are so amazingly perfect and loving with absolutely no flaws. Oh, and the twist that the evil lady was bad guy's mother, it was so obvious. He was adopted, she had had a child that had disappeared. There was no other way that could have gone. Surely every 9-year-old who's read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone knows that if you're going to put a twist in, you need to have a red herring character. She just didn't. Yeah, really just wasn't very pleased with this book. Maybe if it was aimed at a much younger reader, someone who wouldn't necessarily have come across these tropes before and thus wouldn't find them really cliched. Annoyingly enough, I'm pretty sure I already own the last 2 books in this trilogy. Not sure I can bring myself to read them. Okay, so I've almost ticked everything off that list I made to be read at the beginning of the month. The one left is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I read some of this book. In a way, I read a book because I finished the first book. This just happens to be a collection of the first 2 in the trilogy. Yeah, I'm somewhat clutching at straws there and trying to Hermione-ish go, no, I didn't fail my homework. I am quite liking this book, but it is quite slow and quite meditative. Towards the end of book 1, the word jumps in the plot with regards to who the little people are, why the world has 2 moons, and what worlds are possibly inside other worlds being written by characters. I will definitely read the second book in the trilogy, the other half of the book I was actually reading, but I don't feel any desperate urge to. It's still going to be there in a few months. I might return to it then. Okay, now onto the 5 books I didn't plan to read that I accidentally read. First of all, we have Politics in the English Language by George Orwell, which I made a video about here, and then a book called Here by Richard Maguire, which you can see a little bit more about in my book haul here. Another graphic novel, Seconds by Brian Lee O'Malley, the creator of Scott Pilgrim. I'm a big fan of O'Malley. I actually recommended his book Lost at Sea to those who might like John Green fans in this video here. So the moment I got Seconds, I knew I had to read it straight away. I couldn't wait for a month in which it was designated. I then finished a collection of Sherlock Holmes short stories. This was my emergency book. As you guys might know, Sherlock Holmes, having been published so long ago, is now out of print. So I could download a copy onto my Kindle for free. Having downloaded the Kindle app to my phone, this meant that I could literally read this book no matter what else had happened. If I'd underestimated my reading appetite for the day, finished the one book I'd brought to work with me, this was there waiting. When I accidentally leave my book on the bus and have to make furious trips to the depot, this was there. And of course, when I am so physically jam-packed into a tube that I kind of become a Tyrannosaurus Rex, unable to move my arms just out of the sheer amount of people pressing against me, I can generally slip my phone out of my pocket and read it an inch from my face. So this was clearly a month for a lot of emergency reading because I finally finished my Sherlock Holmes stories. I'll have to find another out of copyright book to replace it. Do recommend me stuff in the comments. And finally, the 10th and last book I read this month was The Year of Living Danishly by Helen Russell. This is a book I wouldn't have read if it wasn't for the new job. Because at the new job, at the beginning of this month, we published this book. So I thought I'd give it a read to see what it was about. Helen's husband is offered a new job, a dream job, working for Lego in Denmark. They and even go so far as considering it, before deciding they'll give it a go, that they will move to Denmark for a whole year. And Helen has decided to experiment, to really make this year worth it. She has heard, as many others surely have, that the Danes are the happiest people in the world. So she will really try and live Danishly while she's there, and see if it does make her happier. As I said before, this is completely not a book I'd normally pick up, but I actually really enjoyed it. Helen's writing is really, really funny. There's a brilliant bit a few months into the adventure where they think they'll pick up some hobbies, where they think they're going to a no-kids night at the local swimming pool. Only they find out it's an adult night at the local swimming pool. But in true British style, try to ignore this and just do some laps anyway. Yeah, I just couldn't stop laughing out loud at this. I had to continuously explain myself to people I was in reading vicinity of, and I'm sure they all thought I was vaguely mad. I think there's a certain extent to which if a book is funny, I will read it regardless of topic. And this, well, it went further. I'm starting to look up flights to Copenhagen. So that is my month in reading. Do tell me in the comments below what you thought, if you agreed with me, if you disagreed with me, if you've got ideas of what I should read for February, which is now. I should make a to be read February video at some point. On that note, guys, I will see you in my next video on Monday. Bye.